to the Complexity of Simplicity podcast, where we, or mostly me, complicate the simple aspects of life. Well, we just use science, but it still counts as complicating simple things. My name is Akhtar, and I'm here with my co host.
I'm Austin, and for today's podcast, we will be talking about the topics of emotion. Not ours, though, just how it works and what different aspects of life could affect our emotion.
More specifically, happiness, sadness, and fear, or more complicated, would be the complex of the physiological experiences of an individual's state of mind as it is interacting with biochemical and environmental influences. So we'll touch on the simple emotions such as happiness, sadness, and fear, and other complex emotions.
Yep, and I'll let you have the floor now.
Every day, we experience different kinds of emotions, whether sadness or anger when you're seeing your team lose, so disappointed Man United lost 1-6 to Spurs, or happiness when seeing a rival team lose a game against a worse team, Liverpool. Well, that reason may have been a bit specific, but in general, different situations and reasons may elicit different kinds of emotions and behavioral or expressional changes. The part of the brain that's mostly behind the simulation of emotion is called the limbic system, a system of structures that is responsible for the stimuli of emotions and memories. To this day, there is no definitive list of the structures within the limbic system within the encephalon region of the brain.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's just that scientists don't really know the full list of structures that would be considered as part of the limbic system, but scientists as a community agree
Oh,
on a few
right,
structures.
I get it now.
So I'll start off with the four main structures of the limbic system. So we have the thalamus. So thalamus is this bulb-shaped gray matter called the thalamus. Is made up of a series of nuclei that serve as a relay station for sensory signals, whether it be touch, sight, or vision, except for smell though. So smell doesn't the smell's relay station is not within the thalamus. Instead, it bypasses the thalamus and instead have its own private station within the upper part of the brain. So all I'm saying is that smell signals have some money to spend to have its own private
Yeah.
station. Another structure is the amygdala, or another name would be the aggression station. So with this name, they simulate fear, anger, violence, and anxiety, and all those negative stuff. However, if your amygdalas are destroyed, you would then have this thing called the Kluver-Bucy syndrome, where you have hyperorality and disinhibited behavior. I don't think I said that right, but whatever. The structure that surrounds the thalamus is called the hippocampus, vital for learning and memory, where it maintains balance between the encoding of memories in the hippocampus and the retrieval of experience from the frontal lobe. And lastly, there's the hypothalamus, where in terms of emotions, it regulates the autonomic nervous system (ANS), which controls your fight or flight reaction.
All right, is that it?
So actually, there's two parts of the brain that relates to the stimulation of emotion, but it's not actually part of the limbic system. But it cooperates with the limbic system.
Okay.
One of them being the prefrontal cortex. So literally part of the brain that's behind the forehead. It has a critical role of modulating emotions that relates with decision making, and different hemispheres of the brain of the prefrontal cortex differentiate in activity between positive or negative emotions. Other functions like judgment or decision making also help gives us emotion. So you could be mad at your team losing a match very badly and contemplating whether you want to punch a TV, but the prefrontal cortex helps you make the decision to not punch a TV because you don't want to spend money on another TV. And the other part would be the insula, which is debated if it's part of the limbic system or not. They don't really know, but for now they don't count it as part of the limbic system. And it has the functions of being able to receive heavy sensory input and provide connections to different specific sensory regions of the brain.
Ah, all right. Sounds interesting, but how do they actually make emotion or trigger different emotion?
Well,
Does it have
I
anything
mean,
to do with the neurons in our brain?
well, yeah, you would be correct in that sense. So neurons have the function to transmit different kinds of neurotransmitters, and it's the way they communicate with each other, which is called synapses. So just like cells, they have a plasma membrane and a channel of proteins, a lot of them. Synapses can be seen as converting electric signals to chemical signals, then back to electric signals or neurotransmitters when it reaches to the other neurons. And this leads me to the transfer of neurotransmitters for the stimulative emotions. Each emotions release special chemicals through different parts of the brain. So with happiness, it activates the prefrontal cortex, precuneus, left amygdala, and left insula, while sadness activates the right occipital lobe, so just a bit behind of the prefrontal cortex, the left insula, thalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus, whilst fear activates both the amygdala, hypothalamus, and other areas of the prefrontal cortex. Happiness, sadness, fear, any other emotions are able to be elicited through memories that would be associated with the prefrontal cortex. So like even the chemicals released are different. So happiness, when you feel happiness, you release four different types of chemicals. There's serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins. However, sadness relates to the imbalances of those chemicals due to the monoamine oxidase A, so MOA. So because of MOA, your serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins levels are really imbalanced. So like one would be higher, one would be lower, and all that. Whilst fear relates to the epinephrine, non-epinephrine, and the cortisol. So example, I see Liverpool lose 7-2 to Aston Villa, and my prefrontal cortex, insula, amygdala, and the precunious are activated whilst endorphins, dopamines, and all the other chemicals are released as soon as I see it, which means I am happy that they lost to
Wow,
Aston
thank you for
Villa.
that information. It's kind of wild that those things happen inside our brain without us even noticing it, and it happens so fast as well. Did you forget something about behavioral changes for different emotions?
Yeah, behavioral changes. Wait, what? Wait, how did you know that? Wasn't I supposed to be the one to only? Wasn't I supposed to be the only one to research?
Well, you weren't the only one who researched about this, and the original plan was for you to talk, but it's a bit too much. Let me get a say.
Wow. Okay, I actually didn't expect you to actually research about this, but this is surprising.
Yeah, but not as much as you though. However, I did research a few topics that could relate to how it affects emotion.
Oh, I'm intrigued. The stage is yours.
Like I mentioned, the stimulation of emotion results in physiological and behavioral changes. The reason behind this is because of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has two arms that's involved in the stimulation physiological changes: sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is involved when negative emotions are triggered, whilst parasympathetic are triggered by positive emotions. Both arms control bodily functions that are not under such voluntary control, such as heart rate, digestion, and sweating. Although they control the same parts, the functions are very much the opposite. Sympathetic is well known to be active in fight or flight mode by using
epinephrine,
or adrenaline to prepare the body, such as raising the heart rate, dilating pupils, mobilizing resources for the other muscles when you need to run out to fight. However, it's not entirely for fight and flight. Other emotions such as anger, fear, embarrassment, the sympathetic system triggers fast palpitations of the heart. Butterflies in the stomach is also due to the SNS. Yeah, I'm giving it initials because it's easier. And sweaty hands from nervousness are also from the SNS. For PSNS, they induce the opposite and for relax digest. They release acetylcholine
acetylcholine,
to slow the heart rate, pupil constricts, and diverting blood supply for the GL tract. Happiness definitely triggers the PSNS accompanied by slow breathing, but surprisingly, sadness triggers PSNS to decrease the heart rate. However, ANS considers happiness and sadness more passive emotions for not needing much response, but because of the ANS and those physiological responses, we wouldn't know whether someone is truly scared or happy based on their responses.
Wow. I mean, like for you to actually research this and try to say those very hard words, I'm pretty surprised, and I'm shocked that you actually researched.
Well, I'm shocked, almost in disbelief, because gathering this information was pretty challenging, and I'm surprised in myself.
Well, anyways, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and a lot of information has been said throughout the podcast. At this time, we'd like to summarize our findings and give a little simplicity to make us remember that simplicity is never bad. Why don't you start off?
We have emotions because different parts of our brain send signals to each other in order for us to feel them. Most noteworthy is the limbic system that has key parts such as the
amygdala, thalamus,
that are triggered due to environmental triggers like smell, sight, etc. They also use other parts of the brain to use memories as an emotion trigger. The way these parts communicate or stimulate emotions is through synapses, aka the transfer of neurotransmitters.
When emotions are triggered, they release different chemicals such as endorphins, dopamines, or epinephrine and non-epinephrine. Even emotions trigger different physiological changes. For example, when I see Austin running to me with a knife, my heart rate increases and I start running. The part of the body that controls them is the ANS, with the SNS for fight or flight reaction and the PSNS for relax and digest. And that has been the Complexity of Simplicity podcast on emotions. I'm Akhtar.
I'm Austin.
Hope everybody is safe, and remember, simplicity is never bad. We'll see everybody around.